Tonight, as the world slows and silence settles around you, I want to take you back, far back, to a time of marble halls, flickering torches, and a man who ruled not only an empire, but his own restless mind. His name was Marcus Aurelius. He wore the purple cloak of a Roman emperor, but when the world turned quiet, he sat alone, writing not commands, but quiet thoughts to himself. What survives is not a story of conquest or glory, but something far more human, a journal of reflections, doubts, and strength. This is not just the story of a ruler, it's the story of a soul learning to carry the weight of life with dignity. So, lie back, close your eyes, and let me share with you the quiet whispers of Marcus Aurelius. In the heart of ancient Rome, beneath the endless sky and towering marble pillars, a young boy sat quietly beside a flowing fountain. His eyes, deep and thoughtful, followed the water as it curved over smooth stones, catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. The city around him bustled, voices rising and falling like the tide, footsteps echoing on cobblestones, merchants calling out their wares. But the boy seemed wrapped in his own world. An old man with silver hair approached, his footsteps slow but steady. Sitting beside the boy, he asked softly, "Why do you watch the water so closely, Marcus?" The boy turned, a faint smile brushing his lips. "Because the water never stops moving. It flows away, and yet it always returns." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "Life is much like that water. It carries us forward, changing shape and course, but always moving. We cannot hold it still, nor make it pause, but while it flows, it can shine bright." Marcus looked back to the fountain, watching the sun dance on the ripples. "Will I ever shine like that?" The old man's eyes twinkled. "You will shine, but not like the sun or the water. You will shine in ways only you can, through your choices, your actions, and the strength of your spirit." Years passed as the boy grew. The bustling streets became quieter memories when he was called to places far grander than the fountain's edge, a vast palace crowned with marble and gold. The simple linen of his youth gave way to the rich robes of a Roman noble. Yet in the quiet moments, when the world's eyes were elsewhere, Marcus remembered the flowing water, the endless sky, and the old man's words. One day, the weight of the empire settled upon his shoulders. His adoptive father, the great Emperor Antoninus, had passed, and Marcus was called to wear the purple cloak, the symbol of power, responsibility, and destiny. The marble throne felt cold beneath him, heavier than he expected. Voices clamored around him, each demanding decisions that shaped lives and cities. Senators argued fiercely, generals awaited commands, and the people looked to him with hope and fear intertwined. At night, beneath flickering torchlight, Marcus would slip away from the grand halls. Cloaked in darkness, he wandered the quiet streets, past sleeping merchants and shadowed alleyways. One evening, a soft voice called to him, a woman selling roasted chestnuts. "Care for one, sir?" she whispered, cradling a warm, fragrant bundle. Marcus smiled gently. "No, keep them. I only wanted to see the stars." She laughed softly, the sound like wind through leaves. "A strange emperor you are." He looked up, tracing constellations with his eyes. "Maybe the stars are the only ones who see us truly." The empire was vast, stretching from the rolling hills of Britannia to the golden sands of Egypt. Yet for all its might, the world was fragile. Threats gathered at the borders, and plagues swept silently through the cities. Marcus rode with his soldiers into bitter winters, tents flapping against the biting wind. He shared their cold meals and watched their weary faces. Beneath the soldier's armor and emperor's robes, he was a man seeking peace. In the stillness of his tent, by the soft glow of a single lantern, Marcus wrote, not decrees or laws, but thoughts to steady his heart. These words were not for others, but for himself, a whispered conversation across the void of night. He reminded himself that the mind was a fortress, unassailable if guarded well. That anger was a poison, sharper than any sword. That kindness was strength, and humility the highest crown. Outside the wind howled, but inside his thoughts were calm rivers. One dawn, beside a mist-shrouded river, Marcus stood watching the current carry leaves and twigs downstream. A soldier approached quietly. "Sire, the men await your orders." Marcus nodded, eyes still on the flowing water. "Tell them we march at first light, and tell them I am grateful for each one." The soldier hesitated, surprised by the softness in the emperor's voice. Gratitude. It was a small word, but carried weight heavier than gold. At times Marcus dreamed of his childhood, of the fountain and the old man's steady gaze. In those dreams he asked, "Does this burden make me strong, or does it break me?" The old man's voice answered, "Only what bends can grow stronger." Awakening, Marcus knew he must bear the weight, not as a crown, but as a lantern to light the way through the darkness. The empire was no stranger to sorrow. Marcus buried children he had loved fiercely, felt the sting of betrayal, and endured the quiet despair of watching friends fall to illness. Yet, in the depths of grief, he found moments of joy, the laughter of children playing in dusty alleys, the warmth of a shared meal, the golden light of a sunset bleeding into the hills. He saw that life was not about avoiding pain, but embracing the fleeting moments of light that made it worth living. In one quiet evening, Marcus found himself in a baker's shop, watching flour turn to dough beneath skilled hands. "The universe needs us all," he whispered. "Pressure shapes us. Fire transforms us." The baker smiled. "Then may the universe make me a loaf as fine as this one." From his place atop Rome's walls, Marcus looked over the sprawling city, roofs glowing soft in dawn's first light, the river winding like a silver ribbon. Each person below was a story, a hope, a fear, a soul as precious as his own. Near the end of his days, as illness crept through his bones, Marcus rode slowly through meadows heavy with wildflowers. He breathed deeply the scent of earth and sky. "This is enough," he whispered. "This is life." He passed quietly, but his words did not fade. Like a gentle whisper carried on the wind, his wisdom flows through time, through the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, and the stillness of night. Tonight, as you rest, think of Marcus, the boy by the fountain, the emperor beneath the stars, the man with the lantern in the darkness. May his quiet strength guide you to peace. May his gentle whispers carry you into sleep. The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, casting soft amber hues across the sprawling city of Rome. The streets were waking, the murmurs of life beginning anew. Footsteps clattering on stone, the distant call of merchants opening their stalls, the murmur of conversations born in the shadows of ancient pillars. But deep within the palace, far from the clamor, Marcus Aurelius sat alone by a small window, the morning light casting a warm glow on the pages before him. His hand rested lightly on a well-worn parchment, its edges frayed from countless readings. These were not the decrees of empire or grand speeches meant to inspire crowds. These were quiet words meant to steady the man himself. He read slowly, savoring the meaning behind each phrase. The thoughts were simple yet profound, reminders to himself that life's turmoil was inevitable, but his response was his own. Outside, the world was a whirlwind of chaos. Senators schemed for power. Enemies gathered beyond the borders. The plague lingered like a shadow on the city's breath. But within this moment, Marcus found calm. He breathed deeply and let the silent strength of those words anchor him. Later that day, he ventured beyond the palace walls, seeking refuge in the gardens where ancient olive trees whispered stories of centuries past. The air smelled faintly of earth and blossoms, and the sunlight danced through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on the stone pathways. A young servant approached, carrying a small lantern. The flickering flame cast gentle light as the day began to fade. "Your hand trembles today, my lord," the servant said quietly. Marcus smiled softly. The weight of Rome presses heavy, but even a flickering flame can hold back the dark for a time. He took the lantern gently, feeling its warmth. For a moment, he closed his eyes, imagining that fragile light extending beyond the garden, touching the lives of millions. As night settled, the city transformed. Lanterns bloomed in windows like tiny stars. The laughter of children faded into whispered prayers and soft lullabies. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer slowed to a gentle rhythm. In the solitude of his chamber, Marcus placed the lantern on his desk and picked up his stylus. The scratching sound of ink on parchment was a quiet companion in the stillness. He wrote not to command, but to remember that power was fleeting, that life was but a brief flame flickering against the endless night, and that kindness was the truest legacy one could leave. One evening, as a gentle rain began to fall, Marcus walked the streets in disguise. His cloak pulled tight, he moved silently past shuttered homes and empty plazas. He paused by a small shrine where a candle flickered in the window. The flame danced bravely despite the rain. A woman stepped out, carrying a bowl of warm broth. She looked around cautiously, then whispered a blessing to the flame. Marcus watched, feeling the simple courage it took to keep that light alive. Even the smallest flame, he thought, can defy the storm. Months later, news came of unrest along the empire's farthest borders. Tribes pressed in like the tide, eager to test Rome's strength. Soldiers marched into dense forests, their armor clinking softly beneath the canopy of leaves. Marcus prepared to join them, not as a distant ruler, but as one who would share their hardships. The night before departure, he gathered his closest advisers in a quiet room. He spoke not of conquest or glory, but of endurance, courage, and unity. "We are all parts of the same whole," he said softly. "Like the branches of an olive tree, we may bend, but we do not break." On the journey north, the landscape changed. Rolling hills gave way to jagged cliffs and frozen rivers. Snow blanketed the earth like a silent shroud. The soldiers struggled against the cold, their breath misting in the air, their hands numb from the chill. One night, around a flickering campfire, Marcus sat with a young soldier whose face was streaked with grime and fatigue. "What keeps you going, young one?" Marcus asked. The soldier shrugged. "Hope, I suppose, and the thought of home." Marcus nodded slowly. "Hope is a light we carry within ourselves. Even the darkest night cannot snuff it out." As the weeks wore on, Marcus found solace not in victory, but in small moments. A shared joke beside the fire, the crackle of kindling, the distant hoot of an owl. One evening he stood alone beneath a vast canopy of stars. The sky stretched endlessly, a tapestry of light and shadow. He breathed deeply, feeling the cold air fill his lungs, and whispered to the night, "We are small, yet within us burns a spark as vast as the cosmos." In the quiet moments before dawn, Marcus penned a letter to his son, a mixture of fatherly advice and humble confession. He urged him not to seek power for its own sake, but to embrace duty with compassion. "To rule," he wrote, "is to serve. To lead is to listen. To be remembered is less important than to be just." The final days of Marcus's life were marked by a serene acceptance. Though his body weakened, his spirit remained bright. He spent hours walking the palace gardens, watching flowers bloom and fade with the seasons. He marveled at the way even the smallest leaf carried the imprint of the whole tree. On his last night, the lantern on his desk burned low, casting long shadows against the walls. He closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and as the world around him slipped softly into silence, Marcus's thoughts drifted like a gentle river, flowing endlessly onward. Tonight, dear listener, as you rest beneath your own quiet sky, remember the lantern, fragile yet brave. Remember the man who ruled an empire but cherished the small light within. May his story be a whisper in your dreams, guiding you gently toward peace. Sleep now. The night is calm, and you are safe. Winter loosened its icy grip as spring arrived like a soft sigh over the empire. Rome stirred beneath blue skies and gentle breezes. Blossoms unfolded on slender branches, and fountains sparkled once again in the sunlight. Markets brimmed with color and laughter returned to the air. But even as the city bloomed, Marcus Aurelius felt a quiet weight pressing against his chest. He rose each morning before the sun, standing at his window as the city gradually awakened. From his high vantage point, he saw rooftops bathed in gold, heard the distant hum of carts rolling over cobblestones, and watched the birds wheeling overhead. One dawn, a servant found him there, leaning slightly on the windowsill. "Your breakfast, Caesar," she whispered. He turned, offering a soft smile. "Is it strange," he said, "that I find greater nourishment in this morning light than in any feast?" The servant lowered her eyes respectfully, though a shy smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She'd always thought him different from the emperors of stories, kinder, somehow, gentler in spirit. Later that day, Marcus chose to walk among the people, as he often did. Disguised in a plain cloak, he wandered through the streets where bakers shouted prices, weavers displayed bright cloth, and children darted between stalls. In a narrow alley, he paused before a small shop where a potter shaped clay upon a spinning wheel. His hands were strong yet delicate, guiding the wet clay into gentle curves. The scent of damp earth filled the air. Marcus watched in silence, captivated by how each touch changed the vessel's form. The potter glanced up, sweat shining on his brow. "A humble trade, stranger, but it keeps the hands honest." Marcus stepped closer, his eyes on the spinning wheel. "And the soul, too. Each turn of the wheel is like the turning of the days." He continued on, pausing to buy a cluster of ripe figs from an elderly woman whose hands trembled slightly as she passed him the fruit. "Bless you, young man," she said, not recognizing the emperor beneath his hood. He tasted a fig, sweet and bursting with juice. For a moment, all the weight of politics and armies seemed far away. He was simply a man savoring the gift of the earth. The weeks passed, and news arrived of trouble stirring in distant provinces. Messengers arrived breathless, carrying warnings of restless tribes, crop failures, and rumors of revolt. The weight of the empire pressed once more upon Marcus's shoulders. Late one evening, he stood in his private study, a single lantern burning beside stacks of scrolls. He traced the flickering shadows on the wall, deep in thought. Rusticus, his old teacher, had once told him, "The mind is a lantern. Guard its flame, or the winds of the world will snuff it out." Marcus whispered softly into the quiet room, "I am trying, old friend. I am trying." Soon, Marcus found himself riding north again through lands where forests stretched endlessly and mists curled among towering pines. The soldiers traveled in long lines, their armor glinting beneath the pale sun. Though weary, they were steadied by the emperor's presence. For Marcus was not a distant figure in shining robes. He rode beside them, his cloak gathering dust, his eyes always searching the horizon. One afternoon, as rain began to fall, the army halted to make camp. Marcus dismounted, brushing rain from his brow. A captain approached, troubled. "Sire, the men are afraid. The tribes are gathering in great numbers." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "So are we. We too are many, and we carry something they may not." The captain frowned. "What, my lord?" Marcus gazed into the rain, eyes calm. "A reason beyond fear." That night, the rain beat softly against canvas tents. The air was sharp with pine and wet earth. Marcus sat beside a low fire, wrapped in a wool cloak. Nearby, soldiers huddled together, murmuring quietly. A young recruit approached him hesitantly, shivering. "My lord, may I sit by your fire?" Marcus motioned him closer. "Come, the fire belongs to all." The youth knelt, extending trembling hands toward the heat. He stared at the flames, eyes wide. "Are you never afraid, Caesar?" Marcus watched the firelight flicker. "Of course I am. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to keep moving forward despite it." The boy blinked at him, then nodded slowly, as if trying to commit the words to memory. The following day, the sun broke through the clouds, and a soft steam rose from the damp earth. Birds began to sing as though nothing had ever threatened the peace of the forest. Marcus rode ahead, breathing the clean air. He paused at a small stream, listening to its music as it tumbled over rocks. Leaning down, he cupped water in his hands and tasted its cold clarity. He thought, "Everything changes, yet the water flows eternal." Weeks later, as battles loomed near, Marcus sent letters back to Rome, instructing that relief be sent to villages stricken by famine. His words were simple, his instructions practical, but each letter carried a quiet compassion. "Feed them," he wrote, "and remind them Rome has not forgotten her children." After a skirmish one evening, Marcus tended the wounded himself. He moved from man to man, pressing bandages to bleeding wounds, offering words of comfort. His own cloak was dark with blood, and his face lined with exhaustion. A grizzled veteran, wincing in pain, managed a shaky grin. "Sire, what emperor does this with his own hands?" Marcus gently tightened the man's bandage. A man who remembers that emperors and soldiers alike feel pain. In the following days, quiet returned, and the forest seemed to breathe in relief. Marcus gathered his commanders beneath the sheltering boughs of great trees. He spoke to them not of conquest, but of duty, mercy, and the unseen ties binding all lives together. "Remember," he said, "each man we face is a father, a son, a brother. War is sometimes necessary, but cruelty never is." As spring deepened, Marcus and his legion turned homeward. Wildflowers painted the hillsides in splashes of color. The rivers ran swift and clear, carrying whispers of renewal. Marcus rode at the head of the column, a faint smile touching his lips as sunlight warmed his face. Though the empire's troubles were far from over for this moment, he allowed himself to breathe in the scent of the blooming earth. He thought of his lantern, still burning, and of the unseen light that connected all things. One evening upon his return, he climbed the steps of the palace and turned back to look over the city. The rooftops glowed in the last amber rays of the sun, the streets alive with laughter and song. He whispered to himself, almost too softly to hear, "All is well. For now, all is well." And so the days continued, one after another, weaving together moments of sorrow and moments of peace. Each dawn brought new challenges, each night brought quiet reflection, and through it all, the emperor's lantern continued to shine.
Summer ripened into golden days, and Rome glowed beneath a sky clear as polished glass. The city hummed with life, the ring of blacksmiths' hammers, the soft rustle of silk in crowded markets, the peal of laughter from children chasing each other beneath archways. Yet, even amid the sunlit splendor, Marcus Aurelius felt the measured ticking of time. He knew that every hour was a thread in a vast tapestry, each woven into the fabric of a story greater than any one life. One evening, as the sky flamed pink and lavender, Marcus stood on the palace balcony, gazing over the rooftops. Below him, lamps flickered to life one by one, casting tiny halos of gold on stone walls. He could smell bread baking in the streets, hear musicians tuning their lyres, feel the hush of night descending like a velvet curtain. A breeze lifted his cloak as he whispered into the gathering dark, "All this shall pass." The marble, the crowds, the clamor of the Senate, even my own breath. But kindness echoes forever. Later, he sat by a low burning lantern in his private chamber, writing his final reflections. His hand moved slowly over parchment, forming letters that seemed simple, yet carried entire worlds of thought. He wrote of patience and of compassion, of the need to accept what cannot be changed and to act with justice where one can. He reminded himself that fear loses its power when faced with reason, and that the flame of courage burns brightest in quiet hearts. Above all, he wrote one last line, so softly it might have been a prayer: "Live in accordance with nature. Let your lantern shine." The following morning, as dawn spread its pale light across Rome, Marcus walked one last time in the palace gardens. Olive trees stood sentinel around him, their leaves whispering secrets in the breeze. Birds sang in the high branches. Flowers opened toward the sun. He paused by a small fountain, the same kind of fountain where he'd once sat as a child, pondering the flow of water. He knelt, cupped his hands, and let the cool water run over his fingers. And he smiled. That night, as Rome slept beneath a cloak of stars, Marcus lay in his bed, breathing slowly. His mind drifted between memory and dream, the laughter of children, the hush of pine forests, the warmth of a soldier's fire, the soft glow of lantern light. When his eyes finally closed, he felt no fear, only the deep, quiet peace of a man who had faced the storms of life and remained true to himself. In the centuries that followed, empires would rise and fall. Stones would crumble, and new cities would rise upon ancient ruins. Names would fade, stories be forgotten.
Yet across the ages, a gentle voice seemed to linger, a whisper carried on the breeze through libraries, through silent gardens, through the hush of midnight streets. The whisper said, "You're part of this world. It is fleeting, but beautiful. Carry your lantern. Let it shine kindly for others. And so tonight, as you lie beneath your own stars, know that the same currents that flowed through Marcus flow through you. May you carry your lantern through each day, gentle and steady. May your kindness leave echoes long after your steps are gone, and may you rest, wrapped in the quiet certainty that, like the river, your story flows onward, shining softly in the dark. Sleep well, dream gently, and let your lantern shine.